Well, this wasn't exactly how I was planning on bringing Ready or Not back on the channel. I was actually looking at it a couple of weeks ago in my Steam library, and I saw that a couple of new DLC had been released ever since I first played through the game. God, I don't know how long ago. And I was like, cool, a couple new DLC, we'll buy the DLC, we'll play through it, and that'll be a Sunday video. But anyway, when I went back this past week to actually purchase the DLC and actually sit down and record what would be today's video, I saw that the Steam reviews were not that great for some reason. I'm like, what the heck? Ready or Not is was a very well-reviewed game by most of the players that actually, sit down and play the game. If you guys are unfamiliar with Ready or Not is a realistic, I would say almost hyper-realistic, first-person tactical shooter. You are in command of a SWAT team set in the fictional city of Los Sueños. It's basically Los Angeles, but it's actually on the southern border with Mexico. The gunplay and the game mechanics are very realistic. Like, you've got 4 magazines worth of ammo on you. Enemies go down in 1 or 2 hits. If you're not wearing heavy body armor, you too go down in 1 or 2 hits, and so do your officers. So you're in command of a SWAT team, and you can order your SWAT team members. You'll stack up on a door, breach the door using a kick, C2 charge, RAM. You have a variety of tools available to you. So it's very realistic in that sense. It's also very realistic in the way that the game presents the world to you, and I guess you can, the setting as well is very realistic, in that the game doesn't really pull its punches. You will be doing things like going into a community college and stopping a school shooting. You'll be raiding drug dens. You'll be raiding human traffickers, and let's just say the worst of mankind. Because I'm not really sure I can say what I need to say without YouTube either giving me another community guideline strike or demonetizing the video. But anyway, it doesn't pull its punches. It's very realistic both in the mechanics and the portrayal of the activities in which you will be stopping in the game. So, why is it getting review bombed? Well, apparently the game is getting released on console, which is huge for a couple of reasons we'll get into here in a second. Now, with the console release, apparently when Void Interactive, who is the developer and the publisher of Ready or Not, was in talks with Microsoft and Sony, apparently those two object to some of the game's content, which then led to Void Interactive announcing that they were having to censor some of the content of Ready or Not for the console release. Which it's like, oh, okay, well that sucks. The console players, they won't get to experience, the full brunt of what Ready or Not has for you. But then, Void also announced that they were going to have to censor the PC version of the game as well, which is the original version of the game. The game was released in early access on Steam. I believe it fully released back in 2023, so it's been fully out now for not even 2 years just yet. Which obviously led to some emotional reactions from the community. Because one of the core things about Ready or Not is that it really doesn't pull its punches. You see the worst of the worst in the game, with the exception of children. The game won't show you children being physically harmed in front of your eyes. It will imply it in some ways, but you won't see dead kids anywhere or kids getting abused anywhere. It is implied in a lot of cases that we'll be going over here in a second, but that's about the only thing that the game doesn't show. Pretty much everything else you can think about when it comes to violent crime and humans being terrible human beings to one another, the game does show you. So when that news came out, obviously the community that it was very excited about having this mature, realistic, gritty game was upset that the game was getting censored for console and that PC was going to have to also get, the vision, quote-unquote, of the game changed. So that festered for a little while, led to the game getting review bombed on Steam to now where it sits at recently. It's been rated mostly negative. It still overall is mostly positive, so they haven't made that much of a dent yet, but obviously seeing that mostly negative rating isn't really ideal next to your game's name, which led to Void coming out here recently, yesterday I believe, and releasing a clarifying statement on the game's Steam page. So according to Void Interactive, most of what's going around about the game being censored and such, it's misconception and misinformation. And what's really neat is that they go in this article and they specifically list what is being changed or censored in the console version of the game. Well, really it is, the console and the PC version of the game now. And I was a little, honestly, I laughed when I saw what was being changed. And I'm like, this is what all the reactions have been about. But I thought about it a little bit more, and I'll share you those thoughts with you guys here in a second. But here's what's being changed. So they list the missions, and then they list what's being changed. And it's not going to take too long to get through it, and I'll throw the images up on screen. So in the mission Twisted Nerve, the girl that you find, which is the only real, child model you find in-game, she is now sleeping instead of convulsing, because originally it was implied that she had OD'd, which is something that does happen in real life. Terrible people will kind of experiment on their kids with the drugs they buy off of the street, or of course the kid could be hooked on their drugs because of whatever poor parenting or terrible things that happened in her life. But now she is just sleeping instead of convulsing. Not a big deal, okay? The mission A Lethal Obsession, which is kind of the Ruby Ridge-esque mission. Nudity involving the ghillie suit suspect has been adjusted. The main suspect in this mission, he runs around naked and he has glued like a makeshift ghillie suit to himself. And yeah, if you look up the ghillie suit, his junk was exposed, but now he's wearing shorts or boxers underneath it. Honestly, didn't realize the guy had his junk out when I played through it the first time. It wasn't until he landed a certain way that I was like, oh, bro's just, hanging out. So, okay, he's wearing boxers now. Not a big deal. In the mission Narcos, the police informant that you find that's being held hostage, he now is wearing underwear instead of being completely nude. He was being tortured beforehand, and this one I can kind of see because it's like, he'd been caught, they stripped him, and they're doing terrible, terrible things to him. So you can imagine, what you feel like in that situation when you're naked and some guy is, peeling your fingernails off, right? So that one is like, oh, okay, that one does kind of, but still not a overly big deal. The mission 23 megabytes a second photo of miner's objective model was revised, also to better connect narratively with the later Sinuous Trail mission. So instead of having the photos of, the subjects there, it's now kind of just evidence, I guess you could say. Which, if you think about the narrative of that chain of missions, which is, in my opinion, is one of the best ones in the game, you go to the Twitch streamer's house, you find out he's, a Minecraft YouTuber, shall we say, and then you follow, the evidence, and later, you get to the climax of the mission where you find the guy that's actually distributing all of this material, shall we say, right? So I guess from a narrative standpoint of oh, this is the beginning breadcrumb that later leads you to the the big climactic mission where you take down the main guy. Maybe kind of sorta, but still not a big change either way. And then the last bullet point here is that post-mortem dismemberment has been disabled. Note that dismemberment for living characters remains unchanged. So you can still blow somebody's arm off with a shotgun, but once they're dead, you can't cut their bodies up. So, yeah, I wasn't really going around, blasting people that had already shot arms, to see if they would come off, So, yeah. And believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, that's it. That is all of the changes to the new version of the game. Not really a whole lot, and not what I would really call, vision breaking. Oh, there was one more. I'm sorry, I kind of glossed over it. In the mission Hide and Seek, the female hostages now wear underwear. They were being human trafficked beforehand. They were completely nude in the container, and now they have underwear on. This, again, kind of in the same boat with the police informant not having, having underwear now. It's like they're being human trafficked. They're being treated like cattle. That was kind of the shock value of you opening up those containers. But again, not an overly big deal because they're still crammed in a container. They're still being human trafficked. And this is, again, the final mission in the human trafficking chain of missions. So, not huge, but it's oh, okay. It takes a little bit of the shock value out of it. But here's my thing. The other missions that have way more shock value than, the missions listed here are completely unchanged. So like Elephant, the school shooting mission, nothing's changing about that. Neon Tomb, one of the single most shocking missions in the game in my opinion, nothing's changing about it. It should be one of the two missions that you're watching the background footage for this video. Nothing's changing about that mission. Valley of the Dolls, the pinnacle of the Minecraft YouTuber mission chain. Nothing's changing about that mission either. And again, Valley of the Dolls, Neon Tomb, two of the most shocking and impactful missions in the game. Nothing's changing about them. So I don't think it's legit to say, it's censorship to the point of like the game's identity is being lost, because it still very much isn't. If you never played Ready or Not, it's quite the shock, especially if you're coming with something like Call of Duty, just because like the way that violence and such is treated there. I mean, like in Ready or Not, you can wing someone with a bullet, not enough to outright kill them, but they'll be sitting there bleeding out. And when people bleed out in real life, they don't just sit there and kind of go, oh, this kind of sucks, I'm losing a lot of blood. No, like they scream in pain because, well, getting shot hurts, right? And they'll sit there and scream until you finish the mission. You can hear them on the other side of the map, because these maps are very small, right? Well, some of them are quite big, but most of them are like medium-sized to small compared to, like Call of Duty and stuff, right? So they'll sit there and scream for the remainder of the match. Again, Neon Tomb, it's a mass shooting in a nightclub being carried out by a terrorist organization. There's dead bodies everywhere. You hear people's phones buzzing and ringing because their families are trying to get in touch with them, but they're never going to get a call back, right? Like, this game still has those heavy punches fully intact, right? So I don't think you can really say that it's altering the vision of the game. Now, another thing to consider too is that a lot of the comments I'm seeing about this on like YouTube comments, Reddit, and on Steam is that, Void caved in, they gave into the pressure, and they changed their game. You have these commentators talking about how like Void's never done that, but believe it or not, they've done it quite a few times. Ready or Not, if you guys don't remember back when this game was like first announced and was first coming out and such, it was no stranger to controversy. In fact, there's a reason that the game's published by Void Interactive, same company that develops it, and not the original publishers, because the original publishers backed out after it was announced that the game would contain a school shooting level. And the original setting was actually a high school, but then they changed it to a technical college, so technically it's adults being shot and not children, right? So they changed that. They also changed a couple of things in response to some reviews. Apparently there were some certain, alt-right memes and stuff in the game, and they changed it, right? They also changed Neon Tomb, again, one of the most impactful missions in the game. They changed the name of the nightclub and a couple other things about the mission in response to how similar it was to the real-life inspiration for that mission, which was, of course, the Pulse nightclub shooting. So they've changed the game before in order to, get out of controversy and, have the game in, I guess, a releasable state. So it shouldn't be a surprise here that these changes are happening, especially when considering that Void Interactive is not a large studio, and they're having to negotiate with Sony and Microsoft to get these games on their platforms. Now, I do think the comments saying, well, like Baldur's Gate has nudity in it, so does Cyberpunk 2077. Cyberpunk 2077, I can cut people in half with my mantis blades or my katana, and then I could kick their head around like a ball after. The Doom series is on consoles and such, right? Red Dead Redemption, GTA 4, GTA 5, GTA 6, I'm sure it's going to be just as violent as the other entries in the series, and they all have, sexual content and such in the game too. But those companies are way bigger than Void Interactive, and they have the weight. Every console wants to have GTA 6 release on them, right? Because it's going to make a gajillion dollars. Ready or Not, as good as the game is, I think the game is very good. I think you should all play the game if you're a fan of shooters. It's a nice change of pace from Call of Duty, if nothing else, and like Battlefield and such. Not really that many copies sold in comparison to like GTA 5 and Red Dead Redemption 2, right? Like, it's a popular game, sure, but it's not that popular. So when you're having to pony up and meet the demands of Microsoft and Sony, who want to make sure that, hey, if we go ahead and let this on our storefront, it's going to sell, so we want you to, kind of tone this down, kind of tone that down, to make sure that, it can get released in, this territory and that territory, so forth and so on. So that's what they're having to do. And another comment I see a bunch is, well, why can't they just have a console version and a PC version? Fair, but also, again, it's a small studio. Now you have to maintain 2 different versions of the same game when you could have them all in one version. And the console version is bringing crossplay to the game as well, so you can play with your friends on console as well. So that may have something to do with it. So, there. So, I don't think the vitriol is quite warranted in this case. If they were making some big, sweeping changes, like toning down the violence and the gore by a lot, completely removing, the human trafficking arc, and completely removing the Minecraft YouTuber arc, or way toning it down, I think that'd be a more appropriate response. But that's not what's really happening here. I do think it sucks that in order to get on console, they do have to make these changes, but if they can get on console, make some more money, and, eventually get around to making Ready or Not 2 or some better DLCs, and that gives them the funds to improve the game, that I think is worth the trade-off. Granted, if it stops here and we don't get any more censorship or changes going forward, but yeah, I think it's a little overblown with what's going on right now, but that's just my opinion. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below about the Ready or Not situation. Share your thoughts with us down there. Hope you guys enjoyed. Have a wonderful Sunday, wonderful rest of your week. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.